So I'd now like to pass the microphone on to Sharon. She's today's host, who will no doubt inspire you all. Sharon is the Director of Agent 99 Public Relations. She has a passion for her client's mission and has built the boutique agency to represent an enviable list of lifestyle and consumer clients across the food, wine, automotive, travel, fashion, and not-for-profit spaces. So without any further ado, I'd like to pass the microphone on to our lovely host for today. Hi, Sharon.
Hi there. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I want to make this really fun and interactive and really give you an overview of what public relations is like in this day and age. And as you can imagine, it's changed a lot. So what I'm going to take you through today is basically a little bit about Agent 99 PR and what we do. We'll talk about PR versus advertising. What are the differences? I just find it's one of those questions that I get asked all the time. And then we'll talk through some PR truths and the current landscape in which we have to operate in as PR practitioners. And then we'll talk through some really practical things of how to generate publicity, some of the common do's and don'ts of a PR campaign. I'm going to go through some success stories and some absolute PR fails. So I think that you'll really enjoy hearing about all of those. Then we'll wrap up and I'll leave some time for Q&A. But at any time, if you do want to ask some questions, there is that ability to do so through that box on the right-hand bottom corner. So, who is Agent 99 PR? Well, we're not a spy agency, as the name might suggest, but we have been inspired by the character 99 in the TV classic Get Smart. She was always intelligent and made Maxwell Smart look so fantastic, and that's how we like to work with our clients. So we're a boutique PR agency. I started it in January 2007, and we've got over 13 years of PR experience in Australia and internationally. We focus mostly on consumer brands, but we also do about 15 to 20% of our business is B2B and corporate. So we're certainly experts in that field as well. So let's get into it. PR versus advertising. I get asked this question all the time, and I think that a lot of marketers and business owners get this kind of information wrong, and I think that there's a really easy way to know the difference between the two. Publicity is essentially defined as the proactive generation of news or stories with a purpose, and the purpose is usually to get publicity for your brand. I don't know if you'd believe this, but it's true. 70 to 80% of what you read, see, or hear is actually generated by PR people myself. So every time you open the newspaper or you might read some news online, there's probably a PR person behind that story, which is really interesting. This next clip I'm going to show you is on YouTube, and it is from the show Absolute Power, which is, if you get a chance to see it, it's hilarious. It's on BBC with Stephen Fry, and it's all about how really not to do PR. So let's try and watch this, and I think Sarah's going to take us through it.
Yeah, so unfortunately we haven't been able to load the clip into the actual webinar today. So if you just click on the link in the messages box in the bottom right-hand corner, that will actually take you to that YouTube clip. So apologies for that, but with YouTube clips it can be a little bit difficult at times. And for those of you who don't have access to YouTube or would like to watch it at a later time, we'll actually include it on the follow-up email which you receive after the webinar.
All right, so on the count of three, let's click. 1, 2, 3.
I'm just waiting for mine to go through an advertisement, and then I can play it all for you guys to hear as well.
Brilliant. There's nothing the British public likes more than to see people sucked down.
Great. So that's some interesting ways to try and get publicity. So what is the difference between PR and advertising? I suppose with ads, you always control the end result. So essentially, if you look at it as the kind of coverage where you pay for it as a company, so it's going to cost you something, that is classified as advertising, and it's termed in marketing as above the line. It involves a media spend, and you control every single aspect of it. So you're always going to know where it's going to appear and when it's going to appear and what it's going to say. So it's highly controlled. PR, on the other hand, is about influencing an outcome, and so it doesn't include a spend unless you're using a PR agency or you've hired someone in-house to do that, and it's termed below the line. So it's usually editorial. And this is often very confused. So sometimes if you're wondering, the easiest way to really distinguish between it is to ask the question, was it paid for or wasn't it? Just wanted to take you through an interesting case study here that happened at Starbucks, which is one of the clients that I worked with in Vancouver. My husband's Canadian, and so I worked there at an agency for a couple of years. Starbucks was a very big brand that we worked on, and at one of the stores, something quite tragic happened. And a young lady was having some pretty challenging times with her husband at home. And he came into one of the stores one day with a knife with the intention to kill her. It was after hours. She was closing up the store with her store manager, and the store manager jumped in front of her, and her husband actually killed the store manager. It was an absolutely tragic event. As you can imagine, because it happened at a Starbucks store, the media was all over it immediately. And there was a real danger of obviously having their reputation tarnished and for people to think of Starbucks as an unsafe place. So as a brand, they, in light of this horrendous situation, they had to rebuild the community's trust in the brand and make everyone feel safe to come in. So they had their PR team on it straight away. A spokesperson was briefed on the tragic occurrence, and even though it was a matter for the police, it was something that they still had to vet media on. And so they put out a media statement straight away. They shut the store down for 3 months. They then reopened the store and refurbished it completely. They erected a memorial to the victim and worked with the victim's family. And they worked with local domestic violence organisations just to make sure that the message is getting across that they just don't condone this kind of behaviour. And they communicated with media the entire way through. So it was one of those things where everyone understood that obviously Starbucks wasn't responsible for it, but they were still very much behind making sure that everyone is feeling safe in their store and that this doesn't happen again. So the result of this success in light of a tragedy was that the reputation of the brand was managed from the outset. So the brand was just knowingly looking after itself. There was community support for Starbucks actions. The long-term brand objectives were unaffected by the crime, and patrons returned to the store and felt really safe. Now, a disaster that didn't go so well is Domino's Pizza prank that happened a few years ago. I don't know if anyone remembers this, but about 2 employees a couple of years ago decided that it would be absolutely hilarious if they recorded themselves just making food in the most disgusting way in the Domino's kitchen. And they uploaded this revolting video up onto YouTube. And as you can imagine, with the power of social media, this video went viral to millions within a few days. And if you Googled Domino's at that time, that disaster actually appeared 5 times on the #1 page for the Domino's search. And Domino's themselves were just too late to respond. They didn't open a Twitter account until 48 hours after this happened, and then they just posted a YouTube apology, and they didn't put out a formal statement. So you can imagine how damaging this was. The research showed the Domino's brand went from positive to negative in 48 hours. That's all it takes to destroy a brand. And 65% of the customers said they would never visit Domino's after seeing that video. So I wanted to put it out there to you guys. How would you have done things differently? What do you think the company should have done? So I'm going to get you guys to maybe submit some answers, and we'll read those out. Anyone have an idea?
Yeah, if anyone's got any answers or anything that they feel that they would have done differently, feel free to type it into the messages box and we can get a discussion going. What about you, Sharon? What are your thoughts on this and how they reacted to it?
Look, I think that they obviously should have had a contingency plan in place, so it was something that they should have anticipated. They've got a very young workforce, and that can happen. So really, in light of any crisis, and a big brand should always have contingencies. And it's not just for big brands, it's for smaller brands as well. Everyone should have a contingency in place in case a crisis does happen. So I think that they just weren't ready. And with social media, if you're going to engage in that, you need to be on it. You need to have a plan straight away.
Absolutely. And Kathy has just said that, also agreeing with you, having a plan beforehand.
Mm-hmm.
And Barbara's also mentioned that disclosing the full story to the media would have been a good idea as well.
That's right. And I think just like Starbucks did with that incident in the store, they kept the media just across everything immediately. So I agree with you, Barbara. I think that you really need to stay in touch with the media. We've got another comment here as well. The same thing happened to McDonald's when their brand was thought as unhealthy. They came up with a solution where they changed, brought in healthy choices menu, etc. I think that that's a really good point, and I think that where McDonald's went really well with that is that they came up with that strategy that was it wasn't just a quick fix. This would have been a huge change to their entire business model. So yes, I think that that's a really good way to look at it, and that also feeds into understanding your audience and knowing that the tides are changing. People don't want to just eat fast food. They're also looking for some healthy options too. We'll keep going. So the PR landscape has actually changed tremendously, as you can imagine. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, when I was working in the industry, it was only very smart, savvy marketers who really knew how to use PR as a tool. But now it's no longer a little-known secret. Most companies, small to large, have somewhat of an understanding of PR and either use PR agencies or they do some PR themselves in-house. So you can imagine that as a result, because of the demand for PR, there's also been a flooding of the market with inexperienced PR operators. So that's just a warning to everyone. If you're going to work with PR agencies or you're going to take someone in-house, make sure that you really check up on their track record. It's very hard to do this job these days, just to get that kind of cut through, because you've got so much competition for the space and editorial out there. You really need to make sure that whoever you're working with has a proven track record. And obviously the digital media boom, I mean, that's just unbelievably unbelievably difficult in terms of knowing where to start first. You've got blogs, you've got Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest, Instagram, YouTube. It just doesn't stop. SEO. Where do you start? So obviously, when you are starting, you really need to look at, it all comes back to your audience and what's important to your audience. Why do we do PR? We do it to reach our audience and to impact our bottom line or to change our brand perception. So you need to look at all of that, and whether, Twitter and Facebook might not even be relevant to your audience. So it's always really looking at it strategically and making sure that you're using the right tools. So I wanted to take you through some basic truths about PR. Remind me why I do this again. It does get very difficult. I mean, I love what I do, and I do it every day with passion, but it is getting tougher and tougher every day. Because sadly, most reporters don't actually care about helping PR people. They're hassled by reporters all day long. We're going to do a little poll here and just see how many releases do you think a popular editor gets in an hour? So you've just got a poll here. Is it A, 1 to 5, B, 6 to 10, C, over 10, D, over 20, or E, over 30? What do you guys think?
Great, and we can see the responses coming through now. So yeah, A, B, C, D, or E, and there's quite a big difference between A and E. And we've got the majority of the responses, so I'm just going to close the poll and share the results with everybody. And there you go.
Yep, and that's great because you guys are correct. It is over 30. It's about 30 to 40 press releases per hour. So you can imagine when I was talking about cut-through and how you can actually achieve that for your brand, it takes a lot more creativity these days, and your space is competitive. So it's likely that your competitors are trying to reach editors as well.
Great.
So reporters don't really care about your product unless you are providing them with something that helps them make their job so much easier. And what does that mean? That means actually providing them with a story that's relevant, that's going to be interesting to their audience and makes their job so much easier to do. So a few great images and some creativity is really going to get it over the line for you. I've got some ways here that I wanted to take you through of how you can actually generate publicity. And it really does vary, and it just doesn't stop there. There's so many different tools that you can use. Obviously, you can do product launches. So this might be where you invite media in your sector, and you might introduce a new product that you've got to them. They're used to very high-end product launches. So if you're going to do a product launch, it needs to be done right. The most common way probably to get in touch with media is to use press releases and media send-outs. So you might tell a story within a press release and send it across to media, and you might send them a product so they can experience it. Through newsletters, you can create your own news platform by doing a newsletter and sending it to your database. Press conferences, obviously, this is used a lot by sporting teams, for example, politicians. One of the last press conferences that I watched was with Alan Jones, him apologising about his comments over the last weekend about the Prime Minister and why her father passed away, which was very distasteful. So if anyone watched the press conference, it's actually quite funny because he really just avoided saying sorry the entire time and talked about about every other issue under the sun, so very entertaining. You can use spokespeople or experts, so you might fly over an expert from your field from the US, for example, and take them on a media tour to represent your company. You can do research, which media absolutely loves, but you've got to remember that research should be done in the correct way. It should be done robustly because these days media is onto it. They know that many companies are using research to get publicity, and so they're going to really hone in on that. So you need to be able to get behind your research and support it. A good thing to do is maybe partner up with a university or partner up with a research company. You can do product experiences. So, for example, we represent the Hunter Valley region. We often take media to the Hunter Valley to experience it and to write about the new things that are happening there. Consumer promotion, sampling and giveaway. So let's say you represent Lipton iced tea and you've got a new flavour that's coming out. You might set up a bus or something mobile that goes around to the different beaches and samples the new flavour. That's another way of doing PR. Media leaks. We used to do this a lot when we launched new restaurants. So we would anonymously, quote unquote, let them know of celebrities that might be dining there to have that whole feeling of this is the hottest place to dine in. Celebrity seating and endorsements. So you might send the product to celebrities and hope that they are filmed using it, or they're wearing it, or they tweet or they Facebook about it. Social media platforms, which we talked about a little bit, obviously Facebook, Twitter, there's a whole other different way to build up your own community. Stunts. One of our clients is mobilephonefinder.com.au, and we worked with them a couple of weeks ago to be the first in line to get the first iPhone 5 in the world, and they got so much publicity out of being in the queue and being the first that their website just took that many, it got so much traffic that it was a really worthwhile. I mean, they camped out there for 5 days, but it was well worth it. new technology. So like I'm doing now, I'm using webinar really to educate, but also to have you guys get to know a little bit about what I do. And webcasting for events. So for example, you might have an event or a product launch where the budget just doesn't necessarily extend to flying media out from other cities. So you might invite them to a webcast where they can watch the launch live as it happens. So you've got so many different technologies as well that are at your fingertips that you can use, and it's a great way to keep budgets in check too.
Just on that, Sharon, so Savio has just asked you to address the research points in a little bit more detail. So you mentioned maybe partnering with universities comes across as more credible.
Yeah, so you might want to, let's just say, I'll give you a practical example. Another brand that we work with from the same mobile phone finder guys, it's creditcardfinder.com.au, and they're a comparison website for credit cards. So you can go on there, check out what the best credit card is for you, and then apply for one. Now, we're doing some research for them in a way where we're looking at the habits of credit card users in Australia. So we learn about the word on the street. What's it all about? How do people feel about using their rewards points? Or, one of the releases that we're working on at the moment is looking at men and women in Australia and whether it impresses them when they go out on a date to see, a gold card or an Amex black card, or, so really some fun things that will help bring back the message, or we can release this to media and then message in about Credit Card Finder and what those guys do. So it's a vehicle, it's an avenue to get your message across. I hope that explains the research point. We'll move on. I want to put it back to you guys. What are some of the ways that you think you could garner publicity, and how have you done that yourselves in your companies if you've done PR before? So I'll put that out to you guys.
Yeah, and once again, if you have any other ideas around this, maybe it's something that you've done in the past, or maybe you've got an idea on something that you want to do in the future, and maybe you'd like Sharon's advice on that, just type it into the messages box in the bottom right-hand corner, and then we can get onto that.
Great.
Just on the black credit card, apparently that's how that's how Princess Mary knew that Frederick was someone special, because when they met at the wedding,
well, there you go.
Like, Amex, and she's like, well, you have to be someone of...
Well, that's brilliant. Yeah. That's a great point. We might even use that in the press release. That's
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, wonderful.
So maybe we'll move on, and then if people think of any ideas, to type in the messages box.
Wonderful. Let's do that. Okay, so what does all of this mean to you and your company if you want to roll out a PR campaign? So I'm going to go through some do's and don'ts that you might want to look at. So firstly, when you're sitting down and you're thinking, yep, I think PR is the right marketing tool for my company, ask yourself, what's your goal? What are you actually trying to achieve? Because that's always going to dictate whether your actions are the right ones and whether it's feeding back into your objectives. And how would you define success? What are your metrics? What are you going to measure your campaign? So when you're done with your campaign, you can say, you know what, that was really good. We're going to do that again. Is it traffic to the website? Is it sales? Is it brand recognition? You might do some research before you embark on a campaign to see how many people know your brand, and then maybe a year down the track you might do a research again with the same group to find out whether there is that awareness there. And can I roll out the campaign in-house, or do I need to find the right PR agency to do that with? Very important, because you need to present your brand in a way that's very professional. So if you've decided, yes, we're definitely going to go ahead, the next step would be to sit down and brainstorm a PR strategy document. You always want to plan ahead, because there's always media deadlines that you need to meet. So you've got to ensure that you're planning, you've got time, you're not just going to media and you're not really prepared. Do we need a company spokesperson? Is there your CEO, or is there a marketing manager? Is there someone who is able to face the media and can give the right messages to media that's going to translate over into the coverage that you're going to get? And if not, is there someone that will do it, but someone that needs media training. So do they need to just sharpen these skills, be put in front of a camera and be tested just to make sure that they are really on top of it and they can deliver the messages confidently? What you do need to do is definitely write a backgrounder on your company. It's amazing how many brands we work with who just expect media to know about their product. But guess what? Unless your brand has already got some awareness around it, they're not going to really know about your product or about you. So you need to have a one-pager that's really easy and clear about what you guys do with some key messages, so then you can just send that over and the media will get an instant idea of who you are and what you're about. You need to think about the latest offering. So what are you going to tell the reporters? Is it, do you have a new product that's coming out? Is there some kind of research that you undertaken that you think is really interesting and will tell your story? And you always have to think about stories with an angle. And you've got to think about it from a reporter's perspective. What is it that they're looking for? And it's got to be free of hype. It's not an ad for your company, and you've got to understand that point, because if they do see it and it's written in the way of advertising, they'll just ignore it. And you've got to ask yourself, can we meet media deadlines? There's absolutely no point in embarking on a Christmas PR campaign a week before Christmas. Firstly, it's just too late. If you want to get, let's say you've got a product that you want to get into women's magazines because that's your target audience, those guys put editorial to bed 3 to 4 months out of Christmas. So that comes back to planning ahead and really knowing your audience.
And just on before about other avenues of PR, so John has said that social media has been instrumental in promoting the National Disability Insurance Scheme.
Yep.
And then Philippa as well. So she presents laughter programs, and what she does is she gives her time to NFPs when they have an event, knowing that there'll be media coverage.
Fantastic. Absolutely. And I think, Philippa, to your point, I think doing corporate social responsibility for your company pays off a lot and is another vehicle that's very much used by companies to not only do good for their community and the environment that they work and live in, it's also a way for them to get the awareness out about their brand. So CSR is certainly a very good avenue for that. Thank you for the contributions. We'll move on. Now, some common don'ts when you're embarking on a campaign. Don't send media an ad about your company. I can't say this enough times. And don't bombard media with irrelevant information. There's really no point in sending a press release about the latest technology to a magazine about pets and cats and dogs, unless that technology is a way to locate lost pets. It's got to be relevant. You always have to send really relevant information to media. So you have to know them, and you have to understand their audience, and you have to understand why it is that you're sending your information to them. Don't be pushy and respect media's time and deadlines. If you're calling up to follow up on a press release, for example, that you've sent to them, and they say to you, the first question that we always ask is this a good time to talk? And if they say to you, no, actually it isn't, I'm on deadline, can you call me tomorrow? Don't push. Just say, thank you very much for your time. I will be sure to call you tomorrow. Because it's all about building long-term relationships, so you've got to respect their time. Don't go into media unprepared. It's amazing what happens if you don't have all your ducks in a row and you've really thought out what the media is going to need. So do you have those images ready? Do you have the information ready? Do you have that background? Can you answer the questions? If they want to interview, are you available? There's no point in sending out a press release when your CEO is on a conference in Brazil. So it's really important that you go into PR prepared. Don't overlook the importance of social media. Just as John mentioned before, social media is an extremely powerful tool, as we saw with Dominos as well, but in a negative sense. It is an incredibly powerful tool to get in front of your audience. And don't react in a crisis. Think your responses through. Be timely. Make sure that you're talking to media immediately, but think through a plan and think through contingencies in case anything does go wrong. A very good example of what happened last year, Qantas had their social media team come up with a brilliant campaign about tell us the best thing about flying business class on Qantas, and you'll win 2 business class tickets to London, I think it was. Now, they didn't foresee how this would turn into an absolute crisis and a PR fail when everyone saw that as the most incredible platform to say the most negative things about Qantas. And they said things like, oh, well, it's, you know, it's the best way to make sure that I'm late to wherever I want to go, et cetera, et cetera. So it just turned into an absolute storm of negative PR, and it was really interesting because, you know, I don't think that they were quite prepared for that. There's another PR success that I wanted to take you through, and the one with Starbucks that I talked about before was really being reactive. It's all about that crisis management stuff that I'm talking about. This is more a campaign that was proactive, which we actually rolled out. The Hunter Valley wine region is one of our clients, as I mentioned before, and they recently rebranded and are targeting 25 to 35-year-olds who are savvy, not necessarily wine aficionados, but people who really enjoy travelling and want the good life. They wanted to get that message out that the Hunter Valley is actually historic, but it is a fantastic place to go with new and hot restaurants, and just putting a whole new spin on the region, which had a little bit of a dated kind of perspective. So what we did, Agent 99, we got together, we brainstormed a strategy, and what we came up with was the Hunter Valley Amazing Race. And what we did was we invited bloggers and traditional media as well in the right demographic on a weekend familiarisation. And what we did was we got them to come along with their partners. There was about 20 odd. We split them into 4 teams, and we got them to guess clues and get the right answer to get from destination to destination. They basically competed against each other. While they were doing that, they had to pick up clues via Twitter and Facebook, and they had to post about everything. So they were also engaging their own audiences. In less than 24 hours, we had 600,000 impressions on Twitter that weekend, and hashtag HVRace trended in the top 10 for the day. So we got a huge following as a result of doing this specific campaign. And because we also had traditional media there, we also got a lot of lovely coverage afterwards, appearing in different media talking about that weekend. So that whole campaign just lived on, which was the point of doing something like that. And it got the right message across to the right people. We also partnered with Yahoo 7. We came up with the idea to search for 3 Hunter Valley secret bloggers. So they had to compete to become those bloggers, and then each blogger won 3 all-expenses-paid trips to the Hunter Valley to blog and engage with their audiences and talk about the latest stuff that's happening there. And that was hugely successful. And alongside that, we also lined up promotions with radio stations, such as Mix FM, to give away weekends to the Hunter Valley, and again to get that right messaging across. So it was a hugely successful campaign. We've seen a lot of great feedback from people in that target audience, the 25 to 35-year-olds, starting to take the Hunter Valley into consideration when they're looking for those weekends away. Now, another one of my favourite PR absolute disasters and fails. This happened in the late 90s, and Ford and Firestone had a partnership where Ford had manufactured new 4-wheel drives and Firestone supplied the tyres. Now, what they found was after a few months of these vehicles launching, hundreds of people were dying on the road. There was just deaths, and it was because the Firestone tyres were actually separating at the treads. The first thing that the companies did was blame the consumers for not inflating their tyres properly. And this went on and on and on, trying to put it back on the consumers. Then the 2 companies realised that this wasn't working, so they turned against each other to try and shift the blame. Clearly that didn't work either. And eventually millions of tyres were recalled, but the damage was already done. So you can imagine what a huge PR fail this was, really, for both brands. So I'm going to put it out to you guys and see what you would have done differently. And I see there's already some answers here, which is great. Linda's saying, recall tyres immediately. Safety is the most important thing. I couldn't agree more. launch an investigation immediately. Absolutely. That is, and you know what? I think there was a question before around, or there was a comment before about apologising. I think that companies stay away from apologising immediately unless it is absolutely apparent that the blame is theirs. And the reason is that they really need to take their time to investigate what's happened. And yes, you might want to recall the product immediately, but you need to know exactly what it is that you're going to apologise for, because once you apologise, you've actually admitted that something's gone wrong, which opens you up to lawsuits, obviously. So you've got to be careful in how you tackle all of that. But yes, absolutely. And I think that if there's people dying, it's a safety issue. Something has to be done, and done immediately. And Kathy says, be sympathetic and serious about the issue. And I couldn't agree more in that you need to immediately put a face to the problem. So whether it's the CEO or someone who's going to front the brand, because there's no point in putting out a faceless statement. It's going to look harsh and cold, and I think it's really important that you put some warmth and sympathy behind the brand so everyone knows that it's made up of people, not just machines. Hannah says, recognise the problem, let people know that you're investigating, take action. Absolutely. And again, it goes back to that Starbucks example where they took it upon themselves to take actions all the time and keep media across what they were doing. It is very important to continue to communicate. Don't shut off. The worst thing you can say is no comment and try and really block off media and not, let them know what's going on. It then allows them to come up with whatever they want to, and you don't have control over the situation anymore, and that really hurts your brand.
Do you think we're talking about obviously the change in the PR landscape, and obviously this was a while ago. Do you think now, if something like this happened, Rod just mentioned that joint action between the two companies, do you think if something like this happened now that two companies would be a little bit more inclined to work together with the impact of social media and everything like that?
Yeah.
So,
look, I think now or then, my theory is that the companies should have worked together throughout the whole process, because people were dying in these Ford vehicles and it was because of the tyres. So, I think that they both have a role to play, and I think ultimately it would have been a lot better if they would have fronted a sympathetic investigation and joined forces to make sure that both their brands live and come out of it looking good. Yes, I agree. Excellent. Okay, let's move on. So, to conclude, before we go into any questions, so to run a successful PR campaign, what is it that you need to know? Basically, understand your target audience. Who are you trying to talk to? Who's your customer? Who are you trying to promote to? Understand the landscape and know what makes your story unique to create that right strategy. There's no point in putting something out to media if you know that your competitors do the exact same thing and they're probably taking it to media already. You've got to find your unique angle, and if you don't have one, make it up. Put some definition around what it is that you offer that's different. Target media carefully, so keep the information relevant. Send them things that are really going to be of interest to them and of interest to their audience. Prepare your media materials well in advance. Make sure you've got your images, make sure you've got your spokespeople, make sure you've got your bios, your releases, your backgrounders, everything that you need, all your ducks are lined up. Be ready to respond within media deadlines. So if you've put out, as I mentioned before, you've put out a press release, you've been successful in securing an interview, make sure that your spokesperson is available. And I think that as you go along and you continue doing your PR, the media starts, the more reliable you are, the more they are likely to use you for expert comment and come back to you. So always think of PR as a long-term strategy. It's not a one-hit wonder. It can be, but if you want to use it as a tool ongoing, you should always look at it as a way to build relationships with media, and it pays off miles. For example, we have undertaken a strategy of where we've been introducing our clients to media in their area, and as a result, having that face-to-face contact, which is very difficult to get, but if you do get it, We've had countless articles written about them or their expert comments used in the article as a result of those meetings. And always have a contingency plan for any unforeseen issues. So, for example, the Qantas thing, well, they should have really thought that through really carefully and, and seen or asked the question, what can go wrong? You always need to do that just to make sure that you're covered and you know what you're going to do in case a crisis does happen. So I think that takes us through the conclusion, and I'll open it up to any questions that anyone might have.
Yeah, and if anyone does have any questions, like I said earlier, whether about PR in general or something specific to a campaign or something that you're trying to launch internally, please feel free to type them in. We had a few questions, pre-questions before the webinar.
Oh, fantastic.
So, Tara, I know this is a little bit like how long is a piece of string, but how long is too long for a PR campaign?
You know, it really does depend on what it is that you're doing and what you're trying to achieve. I think that I'll use an example of a restaurant. With a restaurant, you might want to do a 2 to 3 month initial campaign where you do a launch to target audiences and to media, reviewers, etc. But then you might want to also put in place a strategy that's going to talk to different audiences. So, for example, you might have a food and wine blogger strategy because that's important for you to get in front of the most important bloggers in the country. All of that does take time, so you'd be looking at least 2 to 3 months. If you're looking at perhaps using it as a tool and you're not doing other marketing per se, you might want to look at a more long-term campaign. So 12 months might be more suited, where you might strategically think about all the products that you have and then launch them to media appropriately. And you might use it to tell your story and to profile your company and get out there and talk to media, meet with them, and position yourself as an expert in the field. All those things do take time. So I think that, yes, how long is a piece of string, but you've got to look at what your objectives are. So, for example, back to that restaurant, you wouldn't do that across 12 months because by then people just kind of know about it organically. People have heard about it. So it's about just getting that first initial hit and initial brand awareness, and that's where PR would be really useful to do something like that. So I hope that answers the question.
And Kathy, so are there some key differences between not-for-profit versus commercial PR strategies?
Look, I think the beautiful thing is that when you're working on non-for-profit, it tends to be around issues. And there's always an audience for issues because it affects a lot of people. And there isn't a commercial gain at the end of it. And I think with commercial brands, for example, the challenge that we face is that media is very sensitive to mentioning brands with a commercial interest. So generally speaking, it's actually a lot easier in some ways to do PR for non-for-profits, and that's why you'll actually find that a lot of commercial brands will align themselves with non-for-profits because then it softens things up and it shows the brand in the light of giving back to the community. So they'll get the attention for it, but it's just an easier way for them to get in front of their audience and to have media sympathetic to their cause. I'm not sure if that answers the question exactly, but I think that there is definitely a difference in that. But I think it's how do you use the issue itself that you're representing. I think that it's how you demonstrate the difference the non-for-profit is making to the world and making to the community and the area that you're targeting. Using case studies, the human interest stories is what makes a lot of media tick. And so I think using that as much as possible, obviously with sensitivity, because sometimes it's very hard, cancer patients or whatnot. But if you can do that and do that well, it's in some ways a little bit easier to get that media attention.
Right. And Alan asked a question earlier. So they're looking to launch PR internally. Is it difficult to get media contact details?
Look, there's ways to get media contact details. There's a way that doesn't cost you, but it takes you longer to do. You essentially put together a list of media that you brainstorm together with your team, and you look at media, or you even go to your local news agency and look at different magazines, or you research online and see which online blogs or online news outlets are really important for your target audience. And then you slowly make your way through each one and literally call each one and find out who the best person is to contact. That's the harder but cheap way to do it. The other way is, for example, we use Australian Associated Press, so the Newswire actually has media databases that we subscribe to. It costs us a certain cost per month to do that, but it also helps us do our job a lot more efficiently. So it's worth the cost for us because we use that so much. So those are probably the two best ways to do it. And I think that as you get into PR, the more you do it, the more PR contacts you build. And so you end up with your own very personalised and targeted media lists. So again, I hope that answers the question.
And yeah, just another one from Isa. So what would you say are the most effective forms of PR that are free?
I think still to this day, a really good press release and press kits are the most cost-effective and quickest way to get coverage. I think if you can be really creative, I think that if you think of some really fun stuff to do, so I'll give you an example. We just launched an event a couple of weeks ago that happened in the Hunter Valley. It was a food fight where 4 chefs from Sydney had a food fight with 4 chefs from the Hunter Valley. They were high profile. They fought it out in front of 250 people who ate an amazing luncheon that these chefs prepared, and then they voted on the dishes. And as it happens, the chefs from the Hunter Valley won. Now, to get the attention the whole point was to promote the event and raise that whole profile of not just the wine, but the actual food in the Hunter Valley. That was the objective. What we did was we got press kits and put together some information on the chefs and information on the event, and we got gloves, actual fighting gloves, and we packaged all of that up and sent that across to target media, your Sunday Telegraphs, etc., whoever we thought was a great target audience for this. And we got some fantastic feedback for something like that. So it wasn't just an email, it was something that actually arrived at their desk, and it was clever and creative and made them look at the press release, which is the most important thing. Just to get that attention is difficult. Another one, we launched a game for the Australian Geographic retail outlets. We launched a new game for them it was a kids game that was electronic and involved big animals. So we sent the media giant, sort of 5-foot kangaroos to their office, inflatable ones. So you can imagine the attention that we got from that. We got some great coverage out of it. So it's just being a little bit creative, a little bit out of the box, and engaging with media in a way that will get that attention to your press release and to your product. And I think that's probably one of the most cost-effective ways to do it. I think engaging with bloggers as well is a really great way to influence your audience. But with that, you need to do that one-on-one. It's not one of those things that you should really, you don't approach media, you don't approach bloggers in the same way that you approach media. You've got to do it you've got to understand what they blog about and then react to that.
Right. That seems to be all the questions that we have coming through, but no doubt people's minds will be ticking over once this is over. So before I hand it over to Sharon for closing comments, I'd just like to thank everyone for joining on behalf of Redback and Agent 99. It's been a great webinar, very insightful, even for myself. So thanks once again for joining. As mentioned earlier, please feel free to complete the exit survey at the end of the conference and provide us with your feedback. And keep a lookout for that recording. That will be in your inboxes within 48 hours. So thanks once again to Sharon, and thanks once again for everyone who joined. These webinars are great, and we hope to see you at plenty more in the future. So over to you, Sharon.
Thanks very much, everyone. I really enjoyed passing on the information, and please feel free to contact myself at Agent 99 if you do have any questions that pertain to your business. I'd be more than happy to help. And yes, once again, thank you for sharing a piece of your day with me.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.